It was supposed to be just another routine flight. Passengers boarding, children waving from windows, overhead bins closing with the usual rush. But just minutes later, Flight AI-171 would erupt into one of the most horrifying aviation disasters of the decade. Over 240 lives vanished in a matter of seconds, burned, buried, unrecognizable. And from the smoldering debris emerged just one voice, one man who wasn't supposed to live to tell the tale. Now, after weeks of silence, he finally speaks. And what he reveals doesn't just shake the aviation world. It shakes the very foundation of what it means to survive. Stay with us, because this is not just a survival story. It's a haunting confession from the edge of the impossible. June 12, 2025. Ahmedabad Airport. Flight AI-171, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, begins its journey to London Gatwick. The weather is calm, the aircraft is state-of-the-art, and no one expects what's about to unfold. Just 30 seconds after liftoff, the plane's climb stalls at an altitude of barely 600 feet. Witnesses see it dragging dangerously low over rooftops. A moment later, it vanishes behind buildings. Then, an eruption. A fireball, black smoke, debris raining down on a hospital campus. The emergency systems barely had time to register distress. Contact with the tower cuts out, and the world watches in disbelief as headlines flash. Plane down in Ahmedabad, hundreds feared dead. What followed was chaos. Rescue teams tearing through wreckage, families waiting in anguish, medics overwhelmed by bodies burned beyond recognition. It seemed impossible anyone could have made it out alive. But then came the whisper. A survivor. His name, Vishwashkumar Romesh, a 40-year-old British national, seated in row 11A. According to emergency responders, he was found barely conscious, legs shattered, skin burned, body wedged beneath mangled aluminum. Somehow, in the final seconds, he had unlatched the emergency hatch and hurled himself out. A move so reckless, so last minute, it could only be described as instinct. Fate? Luck? Or something deeper? For days, Vishwashkumar remained silent. Sedated, stitched together, surrounded by security and trauma counselors. Reporters camped outside his hospital, world leaders offered prayers, and the airline scrambled for answers. But he said nothing, until now. In a quiet room, speaking to a single journalist, he finally broke the silence. "I thought I was already dead," he began. The cabin was shaking, people screaming. I remember one child crying and then nothing. He doesn't remember jumping. He only remembers a light, a flash behind his eyes. When he woke up, he was on the ground, watching the plane burn. I thought I was dreaming, until the heat hit me. But what haunts investigators most is what he says he saw just before the crash. According to Vishwashkumar, moments before the engine stalled, several cabin lights flickered violently. Screens in the headrests blinked and rebooted. A steward stumbled and said, "Something's wrong with the thrust," and then a deafening silence. "The engines were on," he said, "but we weren't going anywhere." The plane was moving, but it felt like falling, not diving, sinking. His account matches eerie anomalies in the black box. Systems thought the plane was still taxiing, even as it reached full throttle. But for Vishwashkumar, the most terrifying part wasn't the malfunction. It was the look in the flight attendants' eyes. They knew something was wrong, but couldn't do anything about it. After recounting the flickering lights and the eerie feeling of sinking, Vishwashkumar described something that stopped the room cold, a sound that didn't belong on an aircraft. "It was like a zipper being torn open," he said, a ripping metallic shriek coming from under the cabin floor. At first he thought it was part of the crash, but then he remembered something strange. The noise happened before the final drop. He said the passengers looked around, confused, as if they could feel something shifting. The flight attendant standing nearby had just begun to walk toward the cockpit when the aircraft suddenly tilted. Seconds later, impact. Investigators would later find that the aircraft's rear hydraulic line had burst, but the noise Vishwashkumar described doesn't match a fluid leak. Engineers reviewing the data believe it could have been a panel detaching, possibly the same object seen in the now infamous crash footage. A mechanical scream, lost in the roar of disaster, but remembered by the only man who lived. After regaining consciousness, Vishwashkumar began to experience vivid dreams, so real they felt like memories. In one, he's back in the aircraft, but floating, unable to move, watching the cabin dissolve in slow motion. In another, he sees a woman's hand reaching for the emergency handle, but she vanishes before touching it. "It's like I saw things I never experienced," he said. Trauma specialists dismissed the dreams as common for crash survivors, but forensic analysts raised their eyebrows when one detail matched something not yet released publicly. In his dream, he saw the ceiling tiles peel away, exactly what rescuers later found near the cockpit debris. "I don't know how I knew," he said. "Maybe my brain recorded everything, even things I didn't see. Or maybe, some theorize, he witnessed something that defies logical explanation, a kind of subconscious imprint left by the violence of the crash, or perhaps a warning encoded in fragments of memory. Either way, his mind became a second black box, and unlike the aircraft's, it speaks." One of the most baffling aspects of his survival was how he escaped through an emergency door without being torn apart. Experts universally agree, under pressure, no human can open an aircraft door mid-flight. But Vishwashkumar insists he didn't open it. He says the door was already loose. He reached for the handle, expecting resistance. Instead, it clicked open with terrifying ease. A gust of wind pulled him toward it, and then, nothing. He woke up on the ground, legs shattered, ribs cracked, but breathing. Investigators confirmed that the door was missing from the wreckage area, but no trace was ever recovered. Was it torn off, malfunctioned, or worse? Did the aircraft's hydraulic systems misread the flight mode and release the seal? If so, the escape wasn't a miracle. It was an unintentional anomaly, a door that shouldn't have opened, and a man who lived because the system failed one final time, this time in his favor. Since the crash, Vishwashkumar has undergone over 30 surgeries, lost part of his mobility, and now lives in near-complete seclusion. He says he doesn't feel lucky. He feels chosen. For what? He still doesn't know. "Every night I hear the sounds," he said. "The ripping, the silence, the voices stopping mid-sentence. What haunts him most isn't what he saw, it's what he didn't see. The last glance over his shoulder, the faces of strangers he'll never forget, frozen in that moment of confusion before the world turned black. He carries survivor's guilt like a second skin, asking himself why he was spared when mothers, children, entire families vanished. He doesn't believe in fate. He doesn't believe in luck. But he believes that something failed, and in that failure, he found life. Now, as the only voice left from inside Flight 171, he's breaking the silence, not for himself, but for those who never had the chance. Vishwashkumar Romesh didn't ask to become the voice of 240 souls. He didn't choose to carry their memory or live a life stitched together by chance and scars. But when the fire faded, when the sirens stopped, and when the headlines moved on, he was still here, the last heartbeat from a plane that never truly got off the ground. His survival isn't just improbable, it's impossible in every way we've been taught to understand flight, structure, and fate. A door that opened when it shouldn't, a man thrown clear by chaos, and a memory full of details no black box ever recorded. In that silence, in that darkness, he became the only living record of a tragedy still wrapped in unanswered questions. And now that he speaks, we have to listen, not just to his words, but to his fear, his doubt, his rage at a system that failed quietly. Because what he survived might not be an isolated failure. It might be a warning, a fracture in the system we all trust with our lives. This isn't about one man. It's about the danger of ignoring outliers, of silencing survivors, of assuming that if the data says nothing went wrong, then nothing did. If his words struck you, if this story shook you, don't let his voice be drowned out. Subscribe to this channel if you believe survivors deserve to be heard. Turn on the bell so you never miss the truths hidden behind headlines. Comment below what you think really happened on Flight 171, and share this video, because silence protects no one. But stories like his, they just might save lives.